For 10 years, I've been trying to make real New York-style pizza at home, and I think that I've gotten as close as I'm ever going to get. At the very least, this is a damn good pizza, authentic or not. For the dough, start with a teaspoon of yeast, a teaspoon of sugar, and a quarter cup of warm water, and wait 5 minutes. I've Heard that blooming the yeast like this is not really necessary, but I like to do it just to make sure that my yeast is still alive before I spend 2 days waiting for a dough to rise that never will. Then put in 2 more cups of warm water, a tablespoon more sugar, and a tablespoon of salt, and then a glug of olive oil. That's like a 1/4 cup at most. Then bread flour, high protein flour, 5 cups to start with, and then knead in the mixer with the dough hook attachment. Wait until it comes together into a reasonably smooth, solid mass, and then you gotta poke it. It should be only slightly sticky. If it's really sticky, add more flour. 5 cups is conservative. You'll know that you've kneaded the dough enough when you can stretch out a little chunk of it so thin that you can see light through it. Now this recipe makes 4 pizzas of the maximum size that I can safely bake in my oven, which is 12 to 13 inches in diameter. So I rip the dough into 4 chunks, and then I roll each of those chunks into a smooth, even ball. Their shape really matters, which is why I rise each ball in its own oiled container. Toss the ball around in the oil and then use it to grease up the sides of the bowl or the Tupperware or whatever it is that you're using that will allow the ball to rise in an even, round shape.
When it comes to cheese slices, choose the one that's 100% real, natural cheese. Sargento.
Want a game like a pro? Find gear your way with the Google app. Tap the lens icon to search what you see, so you can find it, get it, and get back to your game. Get more ways to search when you download the Google app.
Cover them up and put them in the refrigerator. A long, slow rise in the fridge is what gets you the best flavor and texture. 24 hours is the bare minimum. Now, when I mix my dough is when I make my sauce. You need a 28-ounce can of whole plum tomatoes. I really prefer San Marzanos. That's the expensive kind from Italy because they are really acidic. They're very bright. But no matter what kind you get, they will be packed in some kind of liquid. I think the liquid is usually ground up, lesser quality tomatoes that tend to taste pretty bitter. So I fish the whole tomatoes out into a bowl and I throw away the liquid. You could just squish them with your hand, but I like a smooth texture, so I use my stick blender. And I put in a pinch of sugar, a glug of olive oil. That really improves the flavor of the olive oil. And then I put in a lot of dried oregano, which I think is the defining herb of New York-style pizza. Finally, I put 2 or 3 tablespoons of tomato paste in. Without the tomato paste, the sauce is never intense enough, though if you put in too much, it spoils that fresh, raw tomato taste that you get from, the plum tomatoes. Tomato paste is, of course, just heavily cooked and reduced tomato sauce. So I stir it up and I add more tomato paste until it looks just thick enough to me. That is enough for 4 pizzas. And I put this in the refrigerator with the dough because I think it tastes better after it sits around for a few days. Like I said, you gotta age the dough for 24 hours at least. This has been in for 48 hours, which I really prefer, though sometimes I age it a whole week. It almost tastes like sourdough when you age it that long. This is my pizza stone. You really need one of these, and you should get the biggest one that'll fit in your oven. In my oven, I get the best results on an upper middle rack position, though that took some experimenting. Every oven is different. If you have a convection setting, use that. It'll help with the browning of the cheese. Preheat to the highest temperature that your oven's got. No matter how fast it comes up to temperature, let it sit and preheat for 1 full hour. Because this is not just about heating the oven, it's about heating the stone. The stone has got to get rocket hot, and it's very dense, so it takes a while. Preheat for a full hour. Time to think about cheese, and yes, I use string cheese. It is ridiculous, but where I live, this is the only form in which I can get whole milk, low moisture mozzarella. If it's part skim, it won't taste right. If it's not low moisture, the pizza will be soggy. Now, you can probably buy a block of whole milk, low moisture mozzarella in your city. I have to make do with these stupid sticks, but it's not so bad. 6 of them is the perfect amount, 6 ounces for a 12-inch pizza. That's perfect. Then I also grate up some Parmesan or Pecorino to put under the mozzarella layer, which I think is traditional in the higher quality New York-style places. When the oven is ready, get your pizza peel. Yeah, you really need one of these too. Then you have to dust it with something so that the pizza won't stick. Semolina or cornmeal would be traditional, I think, but I have found that coarse ground whole wheat flour works best. It does the job without adding any gritty texture. Now get out your dough ball. That smooth top is going to be the bottom of the pizza because it's more likely to slide off of the peel cleanly. This rough underside will be the top because it'll better adhere to the sauce and the cheese. I start by just going around and forming the cornice. That's the fluffy outer ring of crust. Never smash it down, otherwise it'll never fluff up. Then I just stretch out the dough with my hands. You could toss it in the air like a boss, but that takes skill, it's risky, it's messy, and it really only saves you meaningful amounts of time when you're making 100 pizzas a day. For one pizza, hand stretching is fine. You'll know that you've got it thin enough when, again, you can see light through it.
When it comes to cheese slices, choose the one that's 100% real, natural cheese. Sargento.
Nourished hair. Powered by superfoods. Feed yours with hair food.
Once you lay it down on your peel, you have to work fast. Otherwise, the dough will bond to the wood and you'll never be able to slide it off into the oven. Put your sauce on. I like lots of sauce. Then the Parmesan layer. This really improves the flavor of the pizza, makes it much more rich. Then put on your mozzarella and really take pains to get it on evenly all over, otherwise it won't melt or brown correctly. When you're done, pick up the peel and shake it back and forth to make sure that the pizza is going to release when you take it to the oven. You got to be able to do this with some confidence, like flipping an egg. This should only take 5 or 6 minutes to bake. The trick is waiting for the cheese to brown, but not so long that the cheese overheats and starts to separate, and you get a lot of that orange grease layer oozing out. Some separation is inevitable, but you can minimize it by not leaving the pizza in there for too long. Rather than use the peel, I like to pull the pizza out with a pair of tongs right onto a cooling rack. Resting the pizza on the rack helps keep it crispy, but also, when I've tried resting a hot pizza on my plastic cutting boards, the crust tends to take on the flavor of the dishwasher, which is gross. When it's eating temperature, you're safe to transfer to a cutting board. Now, this pizza is only like 12 inches wide, which is way smaller than traditional New York pizza because we just have a normal little home oven, right? But to me, a defining feature of New York pizza is big, foldable slices. So I just cut this pizza into quarters. That's a nice big slice. Look how brown the bottom is too, by the way. That's what you get from heating the stone for a long time. So there you go. I really think this gets me very close to my favorite New York style pizzas. If you think you know a better way, seriously, please tell me. I'm sure that I will be working on this for a further 10 years. Hey, here's a bonus.
Dave, what are you cooking? Just cook
Okay.
with me.
What are we going to make?
Pizza bread.
Okay. Every time I make pizza, I make a loaf of what my son here calls pizza bread. It is his favorite food, and grown-ups like it too. I take one of these dough balls that I've aged in a wide container so that it can spread out nice and flat. And when you turn it around, you see this spongy, bubbly surface. This is going to get very crispy in the oven. So I just gently stretch it out into a big oval, and then the bottom becomes the top. I smear lots of olive oil onto that porous surface, then I put on pepper, coarse salt, and garlic powder. Bake in the oven just like the pizza. It's ready when the top is just starting to color. Garlic powder burns easily, so very light brown is enough. There, that spongy surface crisped up really nice. I cut this into little strips. You could do bigger chunks, but these are just right for Freddy here. So good.
It's
with the most standard.
This pizza recipe is sponsored by Audible. Start listening with a 30-day free trial by using my link in the description. This is an update of a video I posted a year ago about how I try to make New York-style pizza in a home kitchen. I'm going to show you how my technique has evolved over the last year, and also try to explain things a little better than maybe I did the first time, including what this style of pizza actually is. Start with the dough. Yes, I normally make my pizza dough in a stand mixer, but I will never cook in a stand mixer on the internet again, because I don't want people to get the impression that they need something so expensive to make good food. You don't. All you need is a bowl. Ideally a big bowl with a wide base. These days I start by putting in all my water, about 2.5 cups of warm water. Then some sugar, a tablespoon. Some people might say that's a lot. I don't think that it makes the dough taste sweet. It does, however, help the crust brown at home oven temperatures, which are going to be lower than professional oven temperatures. That's our main challenge here. In goes a teaspoon of active dry yeast. Mix that up and let it sit for 5 minutes. Give that yeast a chance to rehydrate and to eat some of the sugar in there and to be fruitful and multiply. This is called blooming, and it is not necessary. The dough will rise regardless. The reason people do this is to check to see if their yeast is still alive. And guess what? This was dead. Look, no change. I've been working from this jar of yeast since my first pizza video a year ago, and this yeast is no more. It has ceased to be. It's expired and gone to meet its maker. So let's try this again with fresh yeast. You wait a few minutes, and then here's my favorite part. I am not speeding up this footage. This is real time. I love that. Okay, now I am speeding it up. Gonna put in some olive oil. Maybe that's 2 tablespoons or something. Some pros don't use oil in their dough. Again, I think that it helps the crust brown in a home oven. Then in goes a tablespoon of salt. Some people say that will kill the yeast. That is a myth, as you shall plainly see. Certainly with enough salt and enough time, you will kill the yeast, but this will not. Now flour. I use bread flour, which has a higher protein content than all-purpose flour. You can use all-purpose, it just won't be quite as chewy and stretchy. There's even higher protein flours that you can buy on the internet, but this is in every American grocery store. I start with 5 cups by volume. Sure, that's not an accurate way of measuring flour, but this is just a starting point. I'm going to add more flour by feel as we need. I usually just bring that together with a spatula or something, then get my hand in there and knead. You can take it out and knead on the table, of course, but with a nice wide bowl like this, you can keep the mess entirely contained in the bowl. I'm just gathering it together and then pushing it down with the weight of my body behind my palm. When it gets so sticky that I can't really work with it, I'll sprinkle on a little bit more flour. As little as possible, though. I really prefer wetter doughs these days. They bake up lighter and crispier. The only downside is they're sticky and hard to work with, so I'm adding the minimal flour to keep it workable. The test to see if it's ready is to see if you can stretch out a patch of it really thin without it tearing. That is not ready yet. By the way, some pros would say if you're going to use oil in your dough, you should add it at this stage rather than at the beginning. They say you got to let the flour hydrate first before you introduce the fat. The problem with that is that it's hard to knead oil into a dough that's already gone smooth and elastic like this, especially when you're kneading by hand. I've done it both ways, and I think the texture of the finished product is virtually indistinguishable. I just don't think it makes a big difference in a dough this All right, I've kneaded this for 10 minutes, and now I can stretch it thin without it tearing. This is enough dough for 4 home oven-sized pizzas, so I've got 4 containers here, big enough for the dough balls to double in size. I'm pouring a little olive oil into each. Then you could use a scale to divide this into 4 equal balls, or you could do what I usually do these days, which is to tear the ball in half. Then heft each ball for weight. If one feels heavier, transfer some dough to the other ball. One of those goes back into the bowl, and then we do the same to this. Tear it in half, heft the balls for weight, then it's time to shape them reasonably smooth and round. The shaping doesn't really matter so much with a wetter dough like this, because it's just going to kind of go into the container no matter what we do. Then what I like to do is use the ball like a paintbrush to oil the inside of the bowls. In the process, the balls themselves get good and covered in oil too. Very efficient system. The oil helps to keep the balls from drying out, which is especially important if you're going to keep these in the fridge for up to a week, as I do. It also helps you get them out of the container containers later, and the thick coating of oil on the surface again helps the crust brown. At home oven temperatures, because oil is such an effective thermal interface. Cover them up, and then you could either rise them on the table for a couple hours and then bake them, or what I do is throw them straight into the fridge. Some people rise them at room temperature for a bit before refrigerating. I think that makes almost no difference, and this way you can just throw them in and forget about them. I make my dough when I'm not hungry, and then after at least 24 hours cold rise, these are ready, and I can bake one super easily and quickly whenever I want. They're already portioned. Though I do think these basically get better as they age in the fridge, up to a week. I have a whole video about that, which is linked in the description. Okay, time to bake. You need a hot surface to bake on, and I have recently switched from a stone to a steel. I have a video that systematically compares the two. It's also linked in the description. The steel is simply more thermally conductive. It would be too thermally conductive for a 1,000-degree wood-fired oven, but for a home oven, it's perfect. I've recently started putting it on the second highest rack position. I find that's best for browning the top, but every oven is different. You want to get your oven as hot as